By way of introduction, we have Sam Flood from NBC, who's been at the helm now for a while and really responsible for a lot of the things that we noticed when we wrote our PPI report, our player power play index, back in June, which was the report where we talked a lot about how fluid fans are changing in the sense that they want to learn more about the sports they love, and they want to discover new sports. So specifically, we're talking about 2019 and how NBC really was able to separate itself from the pack by doing a number of innovative things with a number of properties. And we asked Sam to join us today to talk about how he thinks about how fans learn through broadcast, through media, and some of the technologies that they're using to make that better and easier for fans to do. So Sam, at the highest level, when you think about the fan experience when they're watching media, what do you want them to do? What behaviors do you expect them to be engaging with when they're watching live broadcasts?
I think there are two levels. The first level is engage in the story. Give people a reason to care. And so once you have a reason to care, then you have to work on ways to engage them at a deeper level so they can understand why things are happening. The magic word, I think, is why. Why could one car get past the second car? Why did this car crash and the other car make it through the wreck? Why was the first down complete short of the first down line? Why didn't he go out of bounds? Why and why and why? That question, that word, in the booth for our NASCAR race, I put that word in front of our talent because I want them to explain why things are happening. There are a lot of stick and ball fans in our country. There's a core auto racing fan group, but we don't always understand why a car is loose, why a car is tight, why a car can't turn. And we need to figure out ways to engage the audience and teach them those things. And through animation, through technology, you can showcase why things are happening on a racetrack to people that might not be into the motorsports world the same way they are to football or basketball or hockey or baseball.
And I'm glad you mentioned talent, because that's the way that sports traditionally has demystified a sport for the fans or the folks at home. We spend a lot of money on talent. Talent falls under you, and you've made a lot of those decisions about how to coach the talent, who to hire, how to put them in front of the audience. How has technology changed the way that talent helps fans learn more about the sport?
Well, you think about a sport like golf, where when you put the tracer on the ball, all of a sudden you can see the flight of the ball, the arc of the ball, the distance of the ball, and these 300+ yard drives become real. And that data takes you to the next level where people can go, oh my God, that is a different zip code than we've ever seen before. And you see how that has changed the way we cover golf, and you can see the flight of the golf ball. You can see that now coming into the green with a 9-iron instead of a 7-iron, that a player can have that much more arc in the ball and they get it higher and land flatter, so you're not going to roll off these hard greens. And I think what Tommy Roy and the golf group has done with the Pro Tracer has changed the way we view golf. In NASCAR, the virtual games we can play help a lot. We can show why a car is turning into a corner better than another car. And little things like when the restart zone happens in a NASCAR race, there's an advantage to the audience because you really don't understand how a restart happens. And when you see that restart line, you go, oh, I get it. Now this guy can pin it, but it's the person who controls the restart. And it gives Steve Letarte, Dale Earnhardt Jr., and Jeff Burton an opportunity to teach as well as make people enjoy the race. And I think it's important that we don't talk down to the core fan, but we're inclusive. And you include everyone in who's watching, so we don't feel like we're speaking in code.
And we have a few of those examples on the screen now. One of the things that was really interesting too is when we were talking with the NFL folks, they said there's a different level of ability to consume these next-gen stats when they're talking to the different broadcasters, that some commentators really gravitate toward using this stuff the way they would a teleprompter or something like that. But how different is it when you bring in talent and try to, acclimate them to these new technologies, these new visualizations? Is there something you do to make it like fit hand in glove with these guys, or is it a different type of process where you are actually training them on the technology very early on?
You have to work with each talent based on their skill set, and what they're focused on. Chris Collinsworth owns PFF, Pro Football Focus, which is an analytics firm that looks into football and football players and breaks down every play by every player in every NFL game and every major college game. So his insights are unique, and his insights have power that he can bring to the telecast. So because of his detailed insights, we're able to look at the telecast slightly differently with Chris, but not putting so many numbers into the game that it complicates it for the audience. But it gives you a better window into what's happening, and Chris has leaned in hard to that, and that's a real advantage. You think of other technologies that's been tried through the years, like through the years there was a putting line that was tried by another network. Well, as anyone who's ever played the game of golf knows, speed determines line. So if you putt the ball hard, you got to go straight at the hole, and your break is going to be less. If you do a soft putt and you're going to let the slope take you later into the putt, it's very different. So there's some technology that the talent will tell you, well, that only works if the person's putting the ball firmly, or if this is really taking the break advantage and it's going to drop it into the hole very gently. So you have to be careful that your technology doesn't give a false story.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of those things that, again, if you look back over the past few decades, there's been all these high-profile technology tests, right? You know, the puck tracking and all these different things that have flamed out pretty badly because people were like, whoa, I don't like that. Does that change the way you approach analyzing and experimenting with new technologies?
Yeah, you have to work with everything you're doing. And you think about the technology that hockey, the NHL is working with us on in terms of player and puck tracking. We don't think we want to have a live trail, which was tried years ago by Fox, which had some real fans and some real detractors. We think there's an opportunity to find the perfect middle ground, particularly in replay, that once this equipment is in all the rinks, you're able to show how the puck is moving, how a goal is scored, the speed of the shot, a lot of data that's going to go. Can't believe Chara can shoot the puck at 100 and X miles an hour. That data has relevance, but you've got to make sure it doesn't get in the way of the joy of watching that game in real time. So you've got to balance that, and a lot of that can happen during replay and look back.
And how do you know that? I mean, do you do a lot of focus groups? Do you do a lot of experimentation? I mean, the NHL did a high profile thing around the All-Star game so that they could try some of this stuff out and, you know, pressure test it. But I don't think it was like a lot of fan focus feedback. It was a lot of, does the technology work? How do you make those decisions? How do you know if this is going to resonate with the fans?
I think you have to look at it. You have to listen to your team who is executing and make sure that your talent and the people that you know and trust within the sport get it, like it, and want more of it. But what you don't want to do is push too hard. I mean, we've tried different techniques with our football coverage. We tried to cover entire college football games with a side sky. So at Notre Dame, we have the regular sky camera and then a side sky, so to cover the game from the side and being closer to the action. And it didn't work as well as we'd hoped, so we used it on a more limited basis. But it was experimenting and learning and trying new things. And if you don't try new things, you're going to stay status quo. And we've got to keep pushing, but you've got to realize when something's not working on a full-time basis and pull back on it.
And not working in your mind is, you know, a lot of negative fan chatter on social media. What other metrics do you look at?
I really don't look at the negative chatter as much as what we feel. And,
Okay.
you know, if you've got to treat yourself as a viewer and say, is this making my experience better? And if it's not, you've got to step back and decide whether you need to do that full time.
And how do you handle that generationally? Because, you know, the younger fans have all the different information up. There's a lot of talk about the second screen. There's talk about them being able to consume more information than, you know, the traditional fan, the diehard fan. And that, you know, a lot of things you've done at NBC, you know, to your credit, is putting more power in their hands. If they want more data, you've given them access to that data. How do you balance that? That's really seems like the most tricky thing in the production world, which is giving the traditional fan what they want, so you deal with the purists, but giving that, you know, fan that wants to learn and dive into the advanced analytics, create their fantasy profile or their team lineup, maybe place a bet, do any of those things. How do you handle that? Is that really the purview of, you know, NBC Gold and Peacock and the digital streams, or are you trying that in linear as well?
Well, I think you got to go back to the New Coke experiment. New Coke might have been loved by 20% of the people, but the problem is you alienated 80% of your people. And that's what we've got to be careful of. You can't alienate the core to please 20%. The beauty of Peacock, the beauty of our digital offerings gives you the chance to play how you want and to set your own learning environment and screening and viewing environment. And so by doing that, you solve that problem. You get the best of both worlds. The people who want more can have more. The people who want a more traditional telecast, that we still put a lot of content in that's high end and that is informative, but doesn't take away from the story that we're trying to tell and the story that people are immersing themselves in.
And let's talk a little bit about the current health crisis and how that may have changed the way that you make decisions. Certainly since March, there's been a lot of production tools and new gimmicks that have come in to pipe in crowd noise, to do social viewing, to really try to emulate more of that togetherness, so that people can learn together, participate together in watching live sports. How much of that are you trying to deal with today versus, you know, trying to mitigate the longer term strategy for NBC?
I think we're looking at how to make a unique opportunity out of these buildings now. For example, inside the bubble at the NHL, there are no crowds, and we're able to hear the on-ice sounds differently. And we're trying to lean into that, and we're still working hard to get the right balance. You think about it, we've done those outdoor hockey games, which is a similar experience to what's happening inside the bubble, because in the middle of a football field, a hockey rink is away from the fans. So we were able during the outdoor games to hear more content on ice. Not all of it PG-13, not all of it even close to PG. But that access allowed us to think about it differently and how we wanted to push the audio and push the sound and push what you're hearing, from the skate sounds to the I'm open, to the goalie whacking a player with a stick in the slot. You want to have that access. And we learned things that in the building, they were playing music between play. Well, if a scrum broke out, hold off on the music for a while. Let's hear that sound of the angst and the anger. And there's a 5-second delay, so the NHL is able to bleep the words they don't want to go home. But I think it's a more intimate view of the game of hockey, and it's a more insider's take on what it's like to be on the ice with the greatest players who ever played the game.
Molly, you never did that. Never whacked anybody in the crease.
Absolutely not.
No,
That's
you wouldn't have done
entirely
that.
unnecessary.
Totally unnecessary.
I think it's very necessary for a good goalie.
So Sam, you used another one of our buzzwords there, so I want to key in on it. You used the word access, and certainly during the period of time during COVID, we focused on how fans learn, but also how they access talent. What are some clever things or some experiments you're doing to give the fans at home more access to the players, to the coaches, to the sidelines, to the locker rooms, things that might give them an insider view, not just the shoulder content, but more of the commentary, the PLL, which you guys have worked with.
Exactly where I was going to go was the PLL, because
go ahead and take it.
that's the exact example of a real-time conversation. And you know, those conversations happen in NASCAR because the cars have radios, and the radios are a communication point. So we're able to listen in during a race, but also at stage breaks, we're able to have a conversation with the winner of that stage or a relevant driver who's in his race car, who's in the middle of action and about to hurtle into that first turn at 190 miles an hour. So we're able to do that now on the Premier Lacrosse League, and the conversations we have in real time have been gold. And the way that the production team has executed that, and the talent team knows how to have the conversation without getting in the way. It all is an evolution going back to inside the glass in the NHL, when we put a person between the benches. Originally Pierre Maguire, who was an NHL coach, and Pierre was able to filter out the proprietary stuff that shouldn't go home, and the information on injured players that shouldn't go home, because there is a culture in hockey. But he was able to tell you about the angst. He was able to tell you about the change-ups. He was able to tell you that you haven't seen player X for 3 straight shifts, which means there's a problem. And that data that you don't normally get from people calling a game from 5 stories above the play, which is where most broadcast booths are. And it's a different use of access. And you have to be respectful of the information that isn't public, but at the same time, you have to give people an insights inside the game.
Well, reading your bio, you're like a 29-time Emmy winner or something like that. So I don't need to explain to you storytelling. You're clearly a mastercraft at that. But what about technology? Like, what is the thing that's on your radar screen when it comes to like the enhanced graphics, the digital optimization of the streams, this type of consolidation in the broadcast tech world that needs to make all this stuff happen? Are you a nerd? Do you watch this stuff? Are you kind of got your finger on the pulse of all the smaller companies that are coming out?
You have to, because you think about years ago when the score and clock first appeared full time on the screen. That was an affront to many people, and now it's the industry standard. You think about what a change in the viewing experience the 1st and 10 line was, and then Freddie and Drew Esikoff, our Sunday night combination, added more to it along the way that made it even easier for the audience to understand how far it was for that first down. And on 3rd down, they shade the field slightly differently to give and cue the audience that something different is going on. And I think that's the value of continuing to evolve and not just hitting status quo, and constantly looking at new companies, who's got the next great element, but making sure you don't get in the way of the telecast at the same time. It's that unique balance.
And where do those startups touch the NBC Comcast elephant? Like when they're thinking of taking their new social viewing platform to you, or their new gamification thing, or their new fantasy thing, where do they take that? Because there's like, traditional linear broadcast skills, there's digital skills, and I'm sure your organization's structured somewhat like that. Where do you expect them to sort of make their entryway into NBC?
Well, Comcast has their innovation lab where they work with outside startups in terms of creating new technologies. And so they're investing in those on a regular basis. So those will come by us sometimes and we'll be engaged. But then it's really the leaders of each sport look at their sport through their lens and how they're going to make it better and how you're going to access the audience differently. And Freddie Ganelli and the Sunday Night Group, they're constantly looking at how to make it better. They're the ones that came up with a high sky and how to look at the field from that coach's perspective, except right over the football field. And that was a really valuable way to play. In horse racing, Rob Hyland continues to innovate, takes advantage of the jockey cam and other ways to take you inside that race and inside that field. And that's all part of what we're trying to do, is let those producers find elements that are going to make them better. And there are always tech firms coming in with the next great idea. And some of them are great, and some of them, oh, that's really interesting, but there's no chance that can work. But you have to listen, because one of these things is going to break through, and you want to be ahead of it.
But if I extrapolate from that answer, they're usually technologies that are sport specific and they hit the property.
They do, but there also is technology in terms of the defense world, where they've got new ways to listen. So, the spies who know how to listen through walls and all these crazy things, what can we hear differently with better audio techniques? And how do you take that technology, drone technology, which continues to evolve? You need more than a GoPro camera to make the shot special. How do you do that? How do you make the shot from a drone something that's going to engage you at a higher level than just a fairly flat shot that doesn't have the same quality as your HD cameras that are covering a race or covering an event?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an answer that's incredibly important to us because we work with all these emerging companies and we're not always sure whether we should tell them to go to the venue operators because you need to instrument the stadium with this camera array, or go to the property because they're the ones who are ultimately going to authorize the use of this technology in the linear broadcast or the telecast, or go to the media companies because they're going to want to bring this as a secret weapon to any of the properties that they're working with when they're buying rights. Do you have a preference on where it starts, or you really don't care?
I think the idea is the most important thing, and then the idea has got to be taken and figure out a way to make it work, because some of these technologies are so expensive, and if it's a one-hit wonder that you can use once a game, how much are you going to spend for that one time you're going to use it? Right. Whereas the kind of the matrix setup we had in Dallas, where there's cameras in one of the end zones surrounding from about the 30-yard line in, with a sequence of cameras that were stitched together so you could zoom around the play and look at it from multiple angles. there was incredible value to that because you could use it multiple times. And we knew we had X numbers of games in Dallas, and eventually other broadcasters were able to use it as well.
Well, we're talking with Sam about what happened last year, from the 2019 calendar year. NBC really was able to demonstrate leadership in this space. When you look at this chart, which of your competitors or peers in the marketplace do you think are doing interesting things, and do you feel like you're challenged most or help raise the bar for what you need to do on a day-to-day basis?
I think every single network and every production team is looking for that next element that's going to make their show even better. And I think there's a lot of sharing in the industry now. In the NASCAR world, we work with Fox on a regular basis. They're great leadership there, and they're a fun group to work with. They're innovative, and like us, they want to be better every day. So we talk about how we can make our NASCAR telecasts better. Turner in the basketball world is really aggressive about what they do, and it's fun to watch them attack and try new things. CBS and NBC share golf together, so we're constantly playing in that space. ESPN has traditionally had the biggest budgets, so they've been the ones that can really attack and throw money at a problem. And the Zone is a newbie, but they've clearly have deep pockets. And then the digital new platforms all are looking at the world differently. So each group, each entity has value, and it's what's neat is we're partners with so many of these people. I mean, we work with ESPN on sports together, and that overlap is real. And so how do you make sure both sides are benefiting from whatever we're finding out? Because other than the whiz bang first year, if it's great, everyone's going to eventually have it. So you want to make sure you don't spend all the money to develop it, and then it goes out to everyone else, and you haven't benefited as much as you'd hope.
One of the things that I see a huge application for is NBC's shoppable TV. When is that going to make its way into sports in a meaningful way?
I think it would have been more meaningful if we hadn't had the COVID shutdown. I think the world has kind of slowed secondary spending on things. You have to be careful because we're shrinking and trying to protect what budget is left. So to launch new areas is tough right now, but I do believe we've done it, we started it, and we're going to continue down that path. It's just going to be a little slower right now until we get our financial footing firmed up and we know when people can start heading back into the ballparks.
Well, I promised you we would be sensitive to your time. I could have this conversation all day, but we really appreciate you spending time with us. The last question I have is really just about where you look for inspiration outside of sports. Do you look to music? Do you look to competitive video gaming? Where do you see a user interaction or media experience that you hope to emulate or borrow from outside of professional sports?
I really look to my adult children. I have a daughter who works for Discovery Network, Discovery Channels and communication, and I see how she's engaging with media, and that I've got a son who's 2 years out of college, and I watch what he does on all levels. He's a big gamer, and seeing how he plays in that space and how he executes and what interests them and makes them go. But neither of them are big sports people, but they are big consumers of media. So they are the perfect lesson to learn from. And I just watch and learn and talk and have conversations with the two of them. And Eliza and Sammy have been amazing windows into that next generation and how they want to consume media. So it's fun to see them watching. My son's got headsets on, a computer in his lap, and the TV's on. And he's gaming or he's doing whatever, but he's engaged at an incredible level on 3 screens sometimes at once.
Oh, I lied. I have one more question because I have John from Nielsen on our Ask Me Anything tomorrow, and ratings is going to come up. So I want to ask you this, and then we'll let you run. Do you think the ratings are, and again, you guys have introduced your own ratings, and you've had some very important thought leadership in this space. How do you get at that experience that you just described with your son, where there's multiple platforms, multiple formats of media? So you might see a decline in viewership in a linear broadcast, but actually the property's growing in strength. How do you balance that?
Well, I think the brilliance of TAD, total audience delivery, tells you all you need to know. We've got to count everyone who's watching wherever they're watching. And so ultimately, as long as they're paying attention and watching our content, we're winning. and we don't care how they consume it. We just care that they're part of the group consuming it. And if they are, hopefully Nielsen can track them properly, and we can get full credit for the audience that is enjoying being told a story by NBC Sports.
And that includes highlights, video games, all the rest of it. There's ways to get into that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what we're doing with our YouTube channels. It's incredible how much consumption happens on those. We grew a motorsports channel from 0 subscribers to 270,000 in a year and a half. I mean, you're able to get people to consume differently, and that's a very different world we're playing in. And we've got to look and attack the digital content as well as the linear.
All right, Sam, we'll let you run. Anything we can expect from you guys for the remainder of the year that we should be waiting for?
Well, hopefully an incredible football season, and hopefully an incredible Kentucky Derby, and a Triple Crown of the Preakness, in out of order Triple Crown. And in 2 weeks, we've got the Indy 500 at an empty motor brickyard. And that'll be interesting, but it'll be fun to tell that story and see what's going to happen on that racetrack. So we've got a lot going on. We got the Tour Championship. So we got a lot of stories to tell. We just want to give people the best seat in the house, which is hopefully in front of a very large television.
Well, we are all looking forward to that distraction. So I appreciate you taking time with us this morning, Sam, and keep demonstrating the leadership that the industry needs. And we'll keep watching.
All right, well, thanks. I appreciate the time.